fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome to another edition of Stateside Footy. I am your host, Steve Silver, and I hope you guys have enjoyed your weekend. Not exactly the type of weekend I was hoping for on this international break, but that being said, it is what it is. And we're left with more questions than we actually have answers. And of course, we're like, 8 months away from the World Cup, 200 some odd days. And it feels like we've regressed in the year under Poch. Of course, we're going to get into that tonight. But before we do, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons as we are on a race to 1,000 subs. And of course, this channel is exponentially grown in the last 3 months. So I do want to thank those that have already subbed and those who will sub in the future. Welcome aboard, man. All right. So last night, the United States essentially gets dummied 2-0 to South Korea, a South Korea team that's good, not great. Especially when you look at the record over the course of the last, couple months, they got ties against Oman, Jordan, Palestine. I mean, Christ's sake. I mean, they're not getting results against mediocre opposition. And of course they come to, Red Bull Arena and they, essentially play us off the pitch. And 24 hours have passed and the emotion is gone. But that being said, we do actually have to talk, some truths and answer some, difficult questions. Because again, man, the way that this shit's progressing, man, I think all of us realize what's ahead of us in what I would consider a massive World Cup for the United States being played on home soil, and the possibility of, being grouped doesn't necessarily sit well with me. But that being said, let's just kind of take a step backwards and get to the reason of why Mauricio Pochettino is absolutely here. Now, when he got hired, I was kind of neutral on it because obviously I'm a massive Spurs fan and I do remember the Pochettino era. But that being said, for as tactically fantastic as he was with Spurs, let's understand the United States doesn't produce that type of talent. He had Harry Kane at the peak of his powers. A Dele Alli, a young Sonny, a Christian Eriksen, a Moussa Dembele, Lucas Moura. He had, Sissoko. He had Toby out. Dude had extreme talent. And of course, he had at the club level, you have days and months to train and get those philosophies attached to players, and you guys come together as a group. But the international game is just something vastly different. It's very, it's very pragmatic. I'll go to say as far as to say that it's simplistic, because the reality is you just don't have the time. And what you want to do is you want to match your tactics to the strength of the national team in which you are coaching. And that was my biggest problem, because Pochettino likes to play that high possession, high press, and use the quality to break down opponents' defenses, and we just don't have that upper echelon talent. Historically speaking, the United States has always been a nation that, because of the of how we develop players, we've essentially developed a nation of very good to great CDMs, center backs, fullbacks, and goalkeepers. Historically, we have always been a nation that has always been a defensive first, counterattacking type of team, and we've done that to a point of great success when it comes to the World Cup. We went from a nation that was lost in the woods for 40 years to qualifying, to getting out of the group, and at least on one occasion, we got past the round of 16, but we're always going to be that round of 16 type of team. And, as the years have passed, my hope was that we would take that base and then we would be able to add to that type of base. And that was my biggest issue with Mauricio Pochettino, was whether or not he actually understood what the United States is when it comes to soccer. Because we're never going to be Belgium, we're never going to be England, we're never going to be France, because this is just not our sport. Yes, the game has developed in 35, 40 years, but we're just not there yet. It is what it is. It is what it is. And so I didn't necessarily think that Mauricio Pochettino, from that standpoint, was necessarily the greatest hire. Yes, I celebrated it because it is a big hire for this country. It really is. But that being said, whether or not his style was going to match the players that we had, and whether or not he would be able to put his ego to the side, could he put his ego to the side and realize that he doesn't have a Harry Kane, or he doesn't have a Messi, or a Dembele, at PSG, those type of players that he was fortunate enough to coach. He doesn't have those type of players at his disposal. He has essentially some very good European-based players, and he has some very mediocre domestic players. That's the pool. That's the pool. By the way, the pool has not grown technically, or even or even skill-wise since the days of the 90s. Let's just keep that real. It has. You take out our European base pool players that were not trained in MLS, and what we have is actually exponentially worse than what we had at the turn of the century. Let's just go ahead and keep it real quick. I want to welcome in Greg Perez, who's in the chat. He says 17 wins and 7 wins, 17 games. I think Poch is getting sacked if Japan game goes worse, and it probably will. I don't think that's going to happen, and of course we're going to get into that too. But the reality is, for the U.S., you have to be able to essentially to implement a set of tactics that are going to play to this group's strengths, and from that, you can bring this group together. That hasn't happened in the year. As a matter of fact, I would go to say that it's gotten worse, because I don't necessarily think that this group of players has bought into Mauricio Pochettino. I don't think he's necessarily lost the locker room. I just think it's a group of players that understand that there's an expectation, to play a certain way. And I think they look at it and say, like, dude, I don't think we're that nation. And I think that's manifested on the pitch. Last night, these dudes, especially in the buildup, they looked like they had no idea what they were going to do. And that was the most alarming thing. Not only did this team not play direct, but they're not doing the simplest things. This team doesn't play with any type of whip. It doesn't team with any type of pace. They're trying to shoot it. They'll try to shoot it up, up the right side, up the left side, and when that doesn't work, what happens? The ball gets pushed backwards, and then they'll sit there. They'll sit there for 5 minutes, just kind of passing it around and looking for somebody to make a run. There's no bravery on the ball because they can't break it down. And in the meantime, you saw exactly what South Korea was trying to do. They baited the U.S. in a couple times, and then all of a sudden, bam, the ball was played over the top, and we saw exactly what happened. Now, let's go back to the start of this window, because we do have to talk about what I thought was a miscalculation from Mauricio Pochettino, because he actually had the summer to tinker. That's my biggest problem. He had an entire summer to look at the player pool, whether it was European based or whether it's domestic based, and it's okay, fine. The U.S. Soccer Federation in itself downplays the Gold Cup. Okay, fine. So you're gonna have a domestic based roster. Okay, that's great. But once the calendar turns to the start of the European based season, and you know exactly the players, where they're playing, who they're playing against, and the talent level of which they're playing against, you cannot afford to continue to bring in MLS-based players. I'm sorry, it is what it is. Like, this is the time of the calendar. This is the time in the calendar in which your first team has to be at every single window. And if you want to bring in a player or two to find out, if they can be integrated with the first team, okay, fine. But 8 players, 9 players, 12 players at this stage, if this was, by the way, if this was a normal window, a normal cycle where we had World Cup qualifying, do you guys believe that we get through qualification and reach the World Cup? Serious question. Do you think we actually qualify? Probably not. Probably not. And I think that, I think in that aspect, that's, to me, that's like the most alarming, because, what's the identity? What's the idea here? That, to me, is the biggest frustration as a longtime U.S. men's national team supporter, and understanding what we are versus what certain coaches think that we could be. I think that's the biggest lie. Because, again, we don't produce those type of players. We are exactly what we are, and we should lean into that, because it's actually given us some of the best results. I go back to the funny thing is, I was talking to my brother today, and I go back to the biggest lie that Jurgen Klinsmann ever told this fan base, was that we can be a front-footed attacking nation. Well, okay. How is that going to be possible? If our development was the reason behind the failure of 2018, then how does that, what does that mean today? Because we're still not producing those that's 10 years later, and we're still not producing those type of upper echelon players where we can actually implement that style of football. It just does not work that way. We are still like that. It still holds true today. Believe it or not, it still holds true today. Our best players are actually midfielders. One of our best players is a center back, or they're fullbacks. Those are our best players. Yes, we have Christian, but let's be perfectly honest, right? Are our strikers world class? No. And by the way, who's behind Christian? Who's behind Musa? Have we produced the type of depth where we can confidently say that we can play a style of soccer that worked in the Premier League? Probably not. We have Harry Namkong. No way U.S. soccer sacks Poch. The kind of stuff that happens to organizations that are serious. U.S. soccer is not a serious organization. I would agree. I would absolutely agree. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily believe in the MLS conspiracy. What I actually think is happening is that Poch knows exactly who his best 15 is. And I would like to think that next window you're going to see those players that will be a part of the World Cup, right? Me personally, I choose to believe that what's going on here is this is like the back end of the roster type of shit. This is an expanded World Cup with expanded rosters to 26. So, for me, this is like spots 20 through 26 on the roster. But that being said, at the same time, momentum is a real thing when it comes to the national team. And again, the national team should be peaking. This should be the time that we're peaking ahead of 2026. Like as soon as you round through the calendar, that's when we should be playing our best football. Our form should be at our best, and this should be an absolute like crescendo heading into the World Cup, into World Cup 2026. As it is, he's still tinkering, and to me, it's an absolute detriment because we still don't know who our goalkeeper is. We still don't know who our true center back pairing is. We don't know who our striker is. Like these questions should have been answered like midway through this cycle. And let's be perfectly honest, right? This is the reason why Mauricio Pochettino was hired. And let's get this out of the way because this is absolutely true. We were sold on a golden generation. Okay? After the failure of 2018, the Michael Bradleys of the world, the Clint Dempseys, Josie Altidores, all of those guys were pushed out for this group. And in some ways, it may have been the right choice, right? We get through qualifying by the skin of our teeth. We go to Qatar and we get to the round of 16. Congratulations. But we don't have leadership in the coaching staff or on the team. And the start of this cycle was an absolute debacle. With the whole Gio Reyna, the feud between the Berhalters and the Reynas, we wasted 8 months only to get Greg Berhalter back, only to get grouped in the Copa America. We fired Berhalter, and now all of a sudden we get Mauricio Pochettino. He was hired to win with this golden generation. That's it. He is not here to streamline the process from the youth teams to the senior national team. He's not here for dual nationals. He is here to win with this group of players. That is it. And for a year now, he has literally been essentially using windows to not actually find out if his golden generation is capable of doing it, because he keeps bringing in certain players to find out, what kind of depth at certain positions that he has. And because of it, this, essentially what this first team, we actually don't know if this first team can actually play well together because we just haven't really seen it. At the Nations League, it was Patrick Agyemang, and it was, whatever. It was Joe Scally because Dest wasn't in. Then it was Freeman, Fossey. I don't necessarily have a problem if it's a European rotation. But that being said, especially in the summer, then it was Berhalter, McGlynn, guys who are going, there's going to be let's understand, some of these guys are going to be lifelong MLSers because that's the level at which they play at. Okay, cool, man. Cool. But we also have enough rotation in Europe where that I'm not going to necessarily say that's I'm not going to say that's a priority, but that being said, they're playing at a higher level. Again, every window that he's had, it should have been, and this is like, I guess, the direct opposite of what Emma Hayes did with the women's team when she gets hired in. She automatically knew who her team was, and there was no tinkering. It was literally like, okay, this is my team, and by the way, they need to actually suffer and they need to play together for the good of the group. And that should have been Mauricio Pochettino coming in and literally just saying, okay, this is my group of 15. They're going to be a part of every single window minus injury because these guys need to, number one, I need to see them, but also these guys need to, gain an appreciation for each other, and they just need to go for it. Period. Period. It just hasn't happened. Now, as far as Pochettino is concerned, I seriously do not think that he gets fired. And by the way, Greg, I actually agree with you. I actually hate the term golden generation because really does one actually win? Right. Like the funny thing is the interesting thing about it is the first time I heard golden generation was in 2014 when it came to Belgium. And that actually really was a golden generation, right? The Kevin De Bruyne's of the world, Romelu Lukaku, those type of players. But again, the interesting thing is like that was the reason why he was hired, because we had a golden generation. Now, one of the downsides of it is the fact that because there has been so much rotation, 2010 as well too, yeah. Because there's been so much rotation, we actually haven't seen a lot of this golden generation, and we actually don't know whether or not if this golden generation is capable of playing a Poch style system. We know for a fact that with the roster 50% of Major League Soccer players, it can't. They just simply can't. But we don't necessarily know whether or not the full first team actually can. But that being said, I don't want to see that because we're just not geared that way. We don't have that type of talent where we're capable of executing what Poch wants. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to get fired because that would require the U.S. Soccer Federation to admit that they got it wrong. That is not going to happen, right? Because Matt Crocker's job, JT Batson, Cindy Parlow-Cone, Don Garber would have to admit that they got this wrong. And of course, with everything that's tied to World Cup 2026, they're just not going to do it, right? I can't imagine. But also, let's also ask the follow up. If you do fire him, who do you bring in? That's going to command the locker room from day one, and that's just going to that's going to do the right thing by calling in all the right players, setting the right tactics. Who are you going to get now at this stage? Yeah, you're not. You're not, which is part of the problem. Because no MLS coach is going to leave their club right now. Maybe at the end of the season. Maybe. But even then, it's like, that's dangerous territory as well too. Because there's already a problem within this fan base because we always think that there's going to be some sort of conspiracy between Major League Soccer and the federation. So it's always going to be some American coach from Major League Soccer. And that's, again, that's not something that I necessarily want to deal with. But Thomas Christensen of Panama would be perfect for this group. Yeah, but you're not gonna get him from Panama. The interesting thing is I didn't like the idea. Because I just didn't know if Poch would be able to drop the ego. Because understand, he's coached a lot of great players, upper echelon talent that went on to do great things for their national team. And of course, the tactics, the philosophy didn't necessarily match our player pool. They just don't. And of course, the rub is that his name is attached to the US job. So if he doesn't, he's never going to get a big time job ever again. That's the rub. And this is what bugs me at this stage, is because he is tinkering. He hasn't shown his best 11 since he's gotten hired. And what we have seen is that this team is playing too narrow. This team is not utilizing its pace and its strength on the outside. It's not getting crosses into the ball. They're not being direct. Hell, for the issue with what Poch wants, which is high pressing, we're not even getting that. We're not getting jack shit from this team. In the style of which Poch wants to play, we're just not getting it. What's interesting is, today my buddy Adam Turner said something along the lines of like, let's just dummy down the tactics and play the old school 4-4-2 and park the bus, and then just pop out on the counter and just use our width, use our speed, put our two best attackers, put our two best attackers up top and just kind of play like we did in 2002, 2006, 2010, 2014. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of for that. At the very least, you're going to be playing to the strengths of the team. At the very least. Let's see. He says, if money was no object, US should have went for Hervé Renard. I don't think that Hervé Renard at the time was available because I think he was under contract at the time. And that would be interesting to see if Hervé Renard is available right now. Give me 1 second. Is Hervé Renard available? Oh, okay, there he is. Let's see. Oh, okay, no, he's not available. He's under contract. He's under contract with Saudi. I agree. Injuries and such. He hasn't had a strong 11. Yeah. The interesting thing though is like even if he does have an 11, I like unless he's willing to adjust his tactics, and potentially play like a 3-5-2 or 3-5-3. And we're actually playing with wing backs and we're using the width of the pitch and we're actually playing to the strengths of the team. We're a little bit more compact in the back. We're actually organized. Yeah, maybe it looks good. But chances are pretty good we're going to be lined up in this this 4-2-3-1 narrow. And it's just not gonna be suitable because we're just not that type of team where we can play we can play a high possession based attack. We don't have the horses to do it. And because we're kind of weak at center back. We've seen Panama, we've seen Mexico, Switzerland, Turkey, and South Korea now just ping balls over the top. And, we're absolutely exposed on that back line. Last night was just terrible, man. The idea that you're going to bring Chris Richards over and then not start him. So you can adjust your tactics midway through so Tristan Blackman can play a full 90. What was the point? So you can definitively say that Tristan Blackman, who, by the way, has been a mediocre MLS center back his entire career. I think he was with LAFC and couldn't cut it at LAFC. Has been with Vancouver for 3 years now, and this is like his best year. He's been, he's 29 years old and has literally been what I would consider an MLS, like a mediocre MLS center back until this season. And now all of a sudden he gets a full 90. Make it make sense, man. And if you're going to do it, you're not going to take Chris Richards out of the lineup. You're going to do it for Tim Ream. And here's the stunning thing. You're gonna play Tristan Blackman over a guy like Nokai Banks. Again, man, make it make sense. I don't think I heard he had a knock in training as well too. Yeah, man, I heard that too. But the reality is, the idea that you're not going to bring in Mark McKenzie or Cameron Carter-Vickers, you're going to continue to bring in the Tristan Blackmans or the Miles Robinsons of the world, or the Walker Zimmermans. Yeah, what's interesting is like it's like if you if you were a mind to, like, I wouldn't mind having Austin Trusty, Nokai Banks, and some of these other young European based center backs that are actually playing in European competitions. Again, man, I just didn't understand the the philosophy behind it. And again, right, this should be a time where we should be peaking. But the interesting thing though is, like, I go back to World Cup 90. I go back to Gold Cup 91 under Bora Milutinovic. Copa America 95, Confed Cup 99, World Cup 2002, the qualification into 2002, the qualification cycle into 2006, Confed Cup 09, World Cup 2010, all of the qualification heading into 2014, the fact that we used to have to compete into a hex in qualification, and some of the international tournaments that we have always played, we have always been that group. We have always been that group that has always had solid center back play, solid wing back play, good goalkeeping, and I would probably assume that holds true today. That by and large, some of our best players are going to be on that side of the ball. Yes, Malik Tillman. Yes, Christian Pulisic. But, again, I also go back to the days where we had Eric Winalda, Claudio Reyna, Brian McBride, Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan. Like, we always had good forward players, guys that had played overseas. But the strength was always going to be from the middle of the pitch to the back, which is why we were always set up. We were always kind of set up in that 4-4-2 diamond. That kind of, we always had that center defensive mid that put out fires ahead of our center backs. And we always used the width of the pitch to play balls forward. We always had a pretty solid center mid, Claudio Reyna, Tab Ramos, some of those type of guys that knew how to play through the center of the park, that would actually play balls forward onto, some of our best skill players, whether that be McBride or Winalda, whatever the case may be. But we always had overlapping runs. So if we were playing down the wing, we always could play balls into the box. We were always that quintessential counterattacking team that always had a good structural defensive base, where we were never going to be outplayed off the pitch. Even when we were playing, opponents that were night and day better, we never got outplayed. And because of it, we were able to have unbelievable results in World Cups, in Copa America, in Confed Cup. We always seem to show up when we absolutely needed it the most. And me personally, that was the biggest issue with Mauricio Pochettino. I just did not think he understood the American way of playing. And by the way, last night in his post game, don't take pot shots at the fans, man. We're not stupid. We're not. Tim Ream was taking pot shots at the fans. It's like, dude, man, show some class. Like, we've been around and we know what we are. We know what we're not. And, to sit here and try to insult our intelligence, man, that just gets my blood boiling, because, at the end of the day, when we trace our lineage back, and we understand that even though that the resources are good today, when it comes to player development, but we also recognize that our development has not gotten better in 30 years. You can't take pot shots at the fans, man. It doesn't look good. But that being said, it's like, who are you? Like, okay, so we have windows in October and we have windows in November, and the next 5, starting on Tuesday, Japan. Then we have El Salvador, Australia, Paraguay, Uruguay. Okay, that's the next 5. This window is what it is, but starting in October, we have to have our best 15 in camp. Period. That means Balogun, Pepe, Sargent, Wright, Pulisic, Tillman, Weah, McKinney, Musa, Adams, Cardoso, Tessman, Robinson, Ream. I hate to use Tim Ream's name, but yeah, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Serginho Dest, Joe Scally, Mark McKenzie, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Austin Trusty, and then of course our goalkeeper situation is what it is, right? But it's Matt Freese, Matt Turner, and maybe your third goalkeeper. I don't give a shit who that's going to be. And then of course Brendan Aronson. And yeah, you're probably going to have the Diego Lunas in there, maybe even a Paxton Aronson. But this whole nonsense of Sebastian Berhalter and Christian Roldan and Max Arkston and Alex Freeman, like, enough, man, enough. But also, let's keep this as simple as possible, because again, man, the international game is not a proving ground for coaches to implement tactics that are hard to implement when it comes to the international game, because again, you only get them a couple times a year for 10 days, so you can't. And it's not the time for you to prove your coaching genius, really. Actually, when it comes to the international game, there's a reason why some of the most successful coaches are successful, because they understand the strengths of their teams, and they also implement tactics that, quite frankly, play to their strengths, and they go out there and they're able to get results. That's it. Which is why Bruce Arena was so successful. To some extent, same thing with Bob Bradley. To the same extent, Jurgen Klinsmann. Yeah, I guess you might be able to throw Greg Berhalter in there. I mean, he did win trophies. But Greg Berhalter had the same problem. He wanted to play like Barcelona 2012. Or Brazil 1970. And that was his big issue as well too. Like, he wanted to play like this beautiful, high possession based soccer. And it's like, dude, you remember what it was like to be a part of World Cup 2002. Like, that's not what we are, man. He's also the same dude that brought Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan to the World Cup. But, this isn't a referendum on Major League Soccer, right? See, here's the thing. It's like, I do absolutely love U.S. soccer, and I like Major League Soccer and the USL, but let's not kid ourselves, right? There's a reason why we have some of our best players playing in Europe, because they are capable of playing at higher levels, and they're actually a little bit more qualified to be competing on the international level, because they're close enough to World Cup competition, which is why you kind of want them in camp. I don't think that this was Mauricio specifically uh, being persuaded or being a puppet of Major League Soccer. Um, Me personally, I think this is trying to find guys that can play your system and guys that you can trust at the back end of your bench because you might need them in a World Cup. Uh, I think he knows exactly who his best players are. But that being said, you know, time is getting short, and we actually have to start putting ourselves in a position where we can start getting some momentum and potentially start winning games. But I don't think he's going to get fired. I just can't see that. I really cannot see the U.S. Soccer Federation doing that because mainly I don't think there's anybody that they can get uh, that's going to be capable enough of putting this thing, uh, righting the ship, so to speak. I just don't think I don't think it's possible. Unless they go MLS. But then the question is who? And then is that person going to be the U.S. soccer coach past World Cup 2026? That's the other problem, right? So you're replacing a short-term hire with another short-term hire. I just don't think it's a good look, right? So I think for better or for worse, Mauricio Pochettino is going to be that guy through World Cup 2026. But I think the time is of the essence, and I think that number one, he has to get his best players into camp, whether they're performing or not. It is what it is, right? So Gio Reyna is going to be in. Malik Tillman is going to be in. Haji Wright's going to be in because you kind of need him. Brendan Aronson is going to be in. McKennie, Musa, Cardoso, Tessman, Adams. Yeah, all those guys have to be in, man. Because you have to get this team functioning. Or this thing is going to get embarrassing. And what happens if the worst comes to fruition in December 2026? What happens then? Right? I think this nation becomes an absolute gets dejected when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. That's the last thing that I want to see happen, man. I do not want to see this nation turn its back on its national team because we know exactly what it feels like to be absolutely riding a high wave going into a World Cup. It is a very sweet feeling, especially during World Cup play when this nation is 100% buzzing. It's a special feeling, and that very well could be for this group. But man, time is of the essence, and the weird thing is, it's like I always look back too, because history is a funny thing because it does have its way of foretelling the future, except for this group. Because again, when they pushed out those guys who probably weren't going to be part of World Cup 2022, they probably were going to get phased out one way or another. But the interesting thing about it is, like, all of those good runs, in 2020, 2002, 2010, 14, you always had a group of guys that were already on their third cycle. Those guys were always going to be the leaders of the group, right? You always had the upper guard that was always like 3 cycles in, and it's like, dude, who are the leaders on this team? That's what bugs me, man. The guys that pull younger guys aside and just lay it out like, dude, here's the program. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And if you're not up to it, man, we got a couple other guys who would be more than willing to step in. Like, I remember, World Cup 98, as bad as it was, you had guys like Eric Winalda who were third cycle guys. World Cup 2002, it was what? Tony Meola, Casey Keller. By that time, Claudio, I think Tab was on that squad as well too. It's like, you go to 2006. It's like you always had third cycle guys that were always part of the leadership group. And I look at this team, I'm like, damn, like who's that dude, man? Who is that veteran that can wear the armband, but also there's a crew of guys, of like 2 or 3 guys that set the tempo for the entire camp. Not only has coaching been an issue, but it's also players as well too, because it's like, man, who's capable of wearing the armband? It's not Tim Ream. It's not Christian. As much as I hate to say that, he's not a captain. So who is? Is it Tyler? If that's the case, that dude's got to play a lot better. It starts with holding yourself accountable, because I got to be honest with you, man. Yesterday, he didn't play all that well. Now, is that a function of, playing with Sebastian Berhalter to one side, and then in the back you have, you have Tristan Blackman? Maybe. I looked at the way that Bournemouth plays, and it's a far discrepancy from how he plays at Bournemouth. But that being said, Bournemouth plays like the US used to play. Indiri Areola and Dini Areola plays like we used to play. Very much compact in the back. They play the ball forward. They use the width and the speed of their wingers, and they manage to ping balls into the box, and they're very good at it. And because of it, Tyler Adams is surrounded with very good players, and he's able to get the best out of his ability at Bournemouth. But here at the U.S. men's national level, it's like this last year, he's been playing with utter shit. Like he's putting out fires from guys that probably shouldn't even be on being at the national team level. Simple as that. So 24 hours have passed, and like, I'm not going to do ratings because I think that's a waste of time. There's nothing really to rate. It was a bad game yesterday. And now we look forward to Tuesday against Japan, who is even a better team. And the question that I have is, is this team capable of, putting Japan under duress? I don't know. I really don't know. Something has to give. This team did look good in the second half when they switched to a back three. They started looking somewhat dangerous. Not crazy dangerous, but they did look a little bit better. So maybe they actually start with different tactics. Me personally, I would keep Christian on the wing. Don't shade him into the number 10. Be more direct with Christian on the wing. I just think that, from that standpoint, I just don't think Christian, especially when you're going up against teams that are far more compact on the backside, that, what the interesting thing is, every single time that we tried to play direct centrally, Korea literally had 2 defenders on the ball, right? And so that's the reason why Luna couldn't get forward. It's the reason why Christian didn't look good in that 10 position. So keep him wide, and play him onto deep balls where he can use his pace and actually use his 1v1 talent to create space to play something in. Or even be a little bit. How about if you are going to try to play central, how about playing weighted passes in where you can actually have him run to the post? A la Sonny. The way that he used to play Sonny into the box with Spurs. Maybe But yeah, you're right, Harry. You're right. Tyler can't be the lone six. I agree. He can't. But all right, so here's what's going to happen this upcoming week. Usually we have a USMNT show on Monday. We are going to be back on Tuesday for the live stream, which I believe is a 7 o'clock start from Columbus, Ohio against Japan. And then on Wednesday, we are back with our USMNT World Cup roster prediction show version 2.0. That's something that we're doing after every window, as we either move up or move down current players at every position, because I think it gives us an idea of exactly what the pecking order is going to be at certain positions. Like, for instance, Josh yesterday, and I've been a long time Josh Sargent supporter, and I think he's absolutely brilliant. But that being said, it's like, service or not, sometimes as a striker you have to be selfish, and I don't think he's selfish enough with the national team. And I think that's obvious. So obviously that's going to be something we're going to be doing on Wednesday following the Japan match. And then again, every single Monday, usually we do Yanks Abroad as we recap the player pool, the European player pool performance over the weekend. Of course, this week there is no real Yanks Abroad because obviously it's the FIFA international break, but that's usually Mondays. And then, of course, we do USMNT on Tuesdays. And again, this week we have a watch along. So that's the thing. This is, I hate to be, I hate to be that grumpy old man, but before I sign off, man, I will just say that we are a counterattacking nation, and that's okay, because generally speaking, we do a very good job of developing sixes, center backs, fullbacks, and goalkeepers. I understand like the last 2 cycles hasn't really been great at all of the above, minus Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson and Chris Richards. I get it. But that being said, I still think that holds true. Because, we also develop pretty decent center mids because we're actually pretty tactical when it comes to that. We develop actually very good quality midfielders, right? And we also have the occasional forward that puts themselves in, good leagues good leagues around the world. Again, still holds true. I would like to see a coach that understands who we are, how we should play, and not be afraid to do it, because we're like, that was the greatest lie that Jurgen Klinsmann ever told this nation, that we can be, a front-footed soccer nation. It's just not what we produce. There's a reason why we have not produced a world-class striker. In the 30 years of MLS, we just haven't done it. We've produced Clint Dempsey, who played for Fulham, mid-table, but he played for Fulham. That's cool. Josie Altidore, pretty good striker, had a cup of tea over there in Europe. Same thing with Eddie Johnson. I look at Christian, it's like, yeah, dude, great player, good player, plays for Milan, but he's not their talisman. Good player. Wes, good player, plays for Juventus, but he's not a key cog within Juventus. Tim Weah, downgraded by going to Marseille, and now he's what? Playing at fullback for Marseille. It is what it is. As we have Ace Lionel, is the MLS quota starting to manifest more? See, that's the thing. It's like, I don't necessarily agree in the quota. Now, definitely, like Pochettino's, predecessors before him, Greg Berhalter, Jurgen Klinsmann, Bob Bradley. Yeah, they showed they flew the flag for Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer, is a funding arm of the national team. So yeah, like coaches have to fly the flag, and I think in a lot of times it's especially under Berhalter and Pochettino, it's so it's so they can say like look at how many great players that we produce that can play for the national team, and it's like yeah, not really. Like we understand that it's bullshit, but that being said, the interesting thing is like when you think about Mauricio Pochettino and you think about the fact that his name and his reputation is staked to this job, there is no way that he's coming into the World Cup with a 50-50 roster. It's going to be the best players at his disposal. Because if he's going to lose, he's going to lose with his best. Because at the very least, it's something that he can explain away in job interviews. Like he can literally explain it away by saying he did the best that he absolutely could with the players at his disposal. The interesting thing is this year with Camp Cupcake and the Nations League and the Gold Cup. Yeah, like he showed the flag and he had a lot of those guys in, but that being said, it's like, we're hearing now that come the next window, he's going to have most of those guys that we expect to be on the World Cup. So we'll see. Like this time in the normal cycle, if you're going to bring in a couple of guys, we're talking like 2 to see how they integrate with the first team. Yeah, that's kind of normal. But 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, yeah, like dude, that doesn't necessarily work, and he's finding it out. Do I think that Don Garber is holding a gun to his head by saying, "Hey, listen, man, you gotta make sure that 50% of your national team is"? No, I don't. I don't think there's some secret quota. Me personally, I think he understands. Yeah, I'm okay with Reese being on the roster as well too. I mean, our goalkeeper. We don't have good goalkeepers playing overseas at the moment, right? So we're kind of at the mercy of Major League Soccer when it comes to goalkeepers. But the interesting thing, though, is it's like when I look at the World Cup roster, like I do believe there's going to be MLSers on the roster because they're like in certain positions you kind of just have to. Goalkeeper being one of them, right? Matt Freese, Matt Turner, those dudes will be on the roster. It is what it is, man. It really just is that simple. I do think a Diego Luna probably makes the roster because I think Poch really likes Luna. I would probably think that there might be 3, maybe 4 at most. But the reality is, it's like Luna's not going to start, and maybe he carries an Alex Freeman or a Max Arston, maybe. But none of those guys are going to be starting, nor should they. But listen, man. Let's stop with this crazy notion that we're a front-footed attacking nation when we know for a fucking fact that we don't produce those players. Because if we did, we would be. But we don't. We just don't. And that's the truth. And if it means that we're, more of a counterattacking team that uses the length of the pitch, that uses the width of the pitch, that actually plays balls forward, tries to get, Pulisic and Weah in space on the wings, where we can kind of attack the box a little bit more centrally with the ball being played in. I'm for it, man. I'm for it because that's what we've always really been. That's what we've always really been. And we actually had unbelievable results with that, playing that style of football. I remember the days of, the 4-4-2 diamond. And it worked pretty goddamn well. Where you had Altidore and Dempsey up top, and you had Landon Donovan underneath, and it worked pretty goddamn well. Or you had, You had, what was it? McBride and Donovan up top, and you're kind of playing with Claudio Reyna underneath. Yeah, man, it worked pretty goddamn well. There was a time where Mexico never came to this country and beat us. Period. And we went on the road and actually got some very good results too. We were a team that nobody really wanted to play because they knew for a fact that when they played us, they got themselves a game. Let's see. To be honest, I don't feel confident enough with Berhalter starting as he was so bad. Yeah, look, dude. Sebastian Berhalter is not a national team player. Let's just call it what it is, right? I guess the question is, do you feel confident with Weston McKennie playing that role? Or Yunus Musa, with Musa coming off the bench, kind of playing that box to box, that deep line playmaker, that roving center mid. I kind of do. Yeah, like I think we understand at this point that there are certain players that should never be near the national team. Especially in that position, the Jack McGlynn's of the world, the Sebastian Berhalters, Christian Roldan. No disrespect to those players, man, but there's a reason why they're playing at the MLS level, which is not it's a good level, but unfortunately, it's not Serie A, and it's not Bundesliga, it's not even Ligue 1. Definitely not La Liga or the Premier League. It just is what it is, man. MLS players, yeah, they're not. And that's okay. That's okay to admit it. It's okay to admit it. And I think that's the biggest issue with the U.S. Soccer Federation. It's like I almost feel like, I wouldn't say the word hate is the right word, but it feels like they dislike U.S. soccer fans because we understand what class looks like and quality looks like. And I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of U.S. soccer fans or USMNT fans end up disliking Major League Soccer, is because we know what quality looks like. We know exactly what quality looks like. And it's not Major League Soccer. No disrespect to MLS, because I actually like MLS. But I'm also not naive enough to think that what I'm watching is on par with some of the best leagues in Europe. It's not. Not even on par with the best leagues in South America. It's better than the Colombian league. It's probably better than the French second division, the German second division, the Italian second division, maybe the Eredivisie, but it's certainly not better than the Championship. That's sure as fuck. Well, all right, guys. It's 7:00 here in the East. And again, what did we learn from that match yesterday against South Korea? That there still is a long way to go, and that Pochettino learned the hard way. That's what we learned. He had to learn it the hard way, that trying to carry MLS players on this roster is not a recipe for success. As a matter of fact, it's only going to get worse if he continues to try to, push a square peg into a round hole, because it's just not going to work. If he wants to get momentum, he has to play with his best players. And that means dropping the ego. In a normal cycle where you have 4 years, you can pick and choose certain players that you want to leave behind because maybe they're not in form, or maybe they're not getting enough playing time. You could do that. But with less than a year now from the World Cup, you have to throw that out the window, because they're not going to get in form unless they actually are in camp, training, and playing. At the very least, you can aid them in their attempt to actually get playing time and get into form. But that being said, it's like, there has been times in previous cycles where previous coaches brought in players that probably weren't playing except with the national team, and they actually were able to facilitate a job. It's time to put the ego aside. It's time to do what's right by this national team, and bring in some of our best players, because the only way that this team is going to be capable of beating El Salvador, beating Australia, beating Paraguay, beating Uruguay, is with the best players. And you can't do that with Tristan Blackman. I'm sorry. It just is what it is. Super furious that we couldn't give a yeah. Yeah, you know what the funny thing is? Like, it was like right before South Korea scored their first goal, and they are kind of dropping back, and they gave us possession, and I was like thinking to myself, God damn it, this is a trap, because I already know for a fact of what's coming next. And sure enough, we got trapped, lost the ball high, and then they pinged one over the top and easily scored a goal. Match against Japan. If we were to lose, does Pochettino get the boot? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because again, man, if the Federation fires Pochettino, they have to admit they got it wrong, which means Matt Crocker loses his job. Either way, I think Matt Crocker loses his job if we get grouped in the World Cup. But yeah, you would have to admit that you got this wrong. And I don't think Matt Crocker, JT Batson, and any of those executive dicks at US Soccer are in a position right now to admit that they got it wrong. They're going to go down with the ship one way or another. And it's a shame too, because if this goes down, if this goes down in a World Cup where we're hosting it, I have no idea where the U.S. Soccer goes from there. I really don't, man. I really don't. And I dread to actually have those thoughts. Yeah, I don't like to think about that. But here's Ace Lionel again. There are high quality players playing in Euro, and some that haven't given a proper chance to play for the national team. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, since Pochettino's been hired, I think maybe there was one window where we had the entire first team there. It has been a hodgepodge of European-based players and MLS players. It's been a constant rotation because there have been some injuries. But that being said, it's like, there's also been windows where we've had players available and he's left them behind. And, the excuses are just mind-boggling. But all right. So listen, I will be back on Tuesday for the U.S. men's national team watch along against Japan. Following that on Wednesday, it is version 2 of the World Cup roster prediction as we go over the positions in depth. I'll tell you who made an impression, who moved up, who moved down, and we will get close to MacGyvering out this World Cup roster as we get close to World Cup 2026. And of course, every Monday, it's Yanks Abroad as we recap the weekend that was. When it comes to our U.S. men's national team player pool over in Europe. And of course, we have USMNT on Tuesdays as well too, as we talk all things U.S. men's national team. I'm actually flirting with the idea of doing a retro watch along, potentially doing. I was thinking about doing U.S. versus Mexico in the 2002 World Cup, doing that watch along because I think that's absolutely brilliant, and just being that channel for the USMNT. Let's see. First time being here. Enjoyed the live. I appreciate it, man. And make sure you like and subscribe, my guy. It's good to have you around. Rich Rod, 908. What's going on, man? Terrible sports weekend for the men, USMNT, and now the Giants lose. Are you talking about the New York Giants or the San Francisco Giants? Which Giants are you talking about? I think the Lions are playing right now, too. Yeah, I think those Detroit Lions are playing. Let's see. Yeah, it's good to see you, Rich Rod. Yeah, and Ace Landell says he's a Giants fan too. Well, I wish there could be a third here. I'm not exactly a Jets or a Giants fan, so it is what it is. But just quickly before I go, real quick, how do you think Tuesday is going to play out, and who do you guys think your suggested lineup is? Because right off the top, the New York Giants, the New York City Giants. I think Ballow's got to start. Christian on the left, Luna underneath, Weah off the right. Let's see. Tyler Adams, and I would probably assume that Sebastian Berhalter gets run out there again. And then it's going to be Arfton, Ream, Richards, and Dest, and I probably assume that Matt Freese is going to start again. That's my predicted lineup. And I think we probably lose this one 2-1. That sounds about right. I don't like to be the naysayer. I'm usually the glass half full. I usually try to be the optimistic U.S. men's national team fan. But that being said, God damn it, man. I don't even. This was just an absolute horrible window from the very beginning, from the roster construction all the way through. I just, it's just been bad. Let's see. For me, I would start Dest at the left, Richards and Ream, and Freeman at the right back. That's interesting. I don't. Yeah, maybe. Especially if they're actually going to keep Christian wide and not shade him centrally. That would be interesting, having Dest ping balls forward to Christian up the left-hand wing. That actually in itself might be interesting. Me personally, I want to see three at the back. Personally, I want to see a 3-5, 3-5, 3-5-3, or a 3-5, 3-5-2. Yeah, a 3-5-2. And honestly, what I would like to see is Balogun and Weah up top, and Christian as that 10, and then having Dest and Arston at the wing backs, with a midfield of Luna, Adams, and throw in a box to box, whether that's Berhalter, Roldan, whoever the case may be. Luca Della Torre, whatever. I could care less. But that being said, it's like at the very least, we know that we're going to be playing with width, and we're also going to be set up a little bit better defensively. That's all I'm going to say. All right, guys, I will see you on Tuesday for the USMNT watch along as we play Japan. So that should be entertaining as itself. And of course, I will be back on Wednesday with the roster prediction show for the World Cup 2026 as we evaluate every single position. And I will tell you who moved up, who moved down, or who is really just the player to be at that position. Ace Lionel says 3 at the back could be risky, especially when we have Ream and Berhalter losing the ball all the time. True. But that being said, with 5 at the back, at the very least, you have that secondary, you have that secondary center back there that's going to be able to provide a little bit of cover at that back line, and you have the left back that's also going to be covering space as well too, especially if you have Ream as the left center back, and then you have Richards, either Richards as the right. And maybe you play Nokai Banks as the central, or move Richards inside and have Banks on the outside. Maybe, you're going to provide a little bit better cover for Tim Ream, maybe. But that being said, it's funny. Here's the funny thing. I would actually be more inclined to give a start to a guy like Luca Della Torre or Christian Roldan ahead of Sebastian Berhalter at this stage. I think Berhalter has played his way out of this team at this point. And if you play a 3-5, a 3-5-2, you're going to be able to provide a little bit of cover. Now, you have to also understand 3-5-2, you're going to be a little bit more defensive and you're going to be a little bit more counterattacking, right? And one of the things that Luca Del Torre or a guy like Christian Roldan especially is good at is that defensive side and being able to play, at least being able to pass forward and break lines a little bit. You know, it's something that Sebastian Berhalter just has not been able to do. Hoping for a win. Let's go, baby, 2-1. That would be nice. That would be nice. I would love it. All right, guys, it's been awesome. I will see you on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, of course, I will see you guys back on the previous Monday. Also, we do have some Tottenham Hotspur content coming forth this upcoming weekend as well, too, as the Premier League returns. And, of course, we have our Spurs pre-match build-up on Fridays. And, of course, we have the Saturday Hotspur watch-along. So that's pretty cool, too, for all you Tottenham Hotspur fans. All right, guys. You guys be good. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you guys shortly. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. Yeah, let's hope for the best. Good night, guys.
Rusted gold.